Guys and girls, it's code freaking red up in here. I woke up into absolute chaos after yesterday's direct didn't happen. That seemed chaotic enough. Today's huge breaking news rumor of Nintendo Switch 2 being delayed is absolutely way worse, absolutely way crazier. But actually, this is future Zach, and I went back and I needed to add this because I realized you're missing a huge key piece of information that is not being detailed in most of these posts, most of these tweets, most of these videos. It's something incredibly important that changes the entire landscape of this big, crazy, insane rumor, and it's exactly why we need to talk all about it right now. Buckle up, grab your popcorn, and get ready, because things are not what they seem. So what's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. This seems like the most unbelievable news. We've been so sure that Nintendo Switch 2 would be coming out soon, that the reveal would be happening. And now a brand new source is coming forth and saying, no, it ain't happening. It's launching January to March 2025. Nintendo has delayed the launch of Switch 2, and they have 5 sources across 3 continents to back them up. Yeah. That honestly puts fear in my soul because I am so hungry for a new Switch console. And no matter what you think or how you feel about the Switch, this is big news. This is going from everybody saying no, it's lining up for 2024, insiders, analysts, freaking people that report on NVIDIA chips, to now saying no, Nintendo has made a move to delay it. I'm going to break it all down. We need to talk about every facet of this, but I got to give you the information that I think is going to really redefine how this is viewed. And I really think if you add 2 plus 2, you're gonna get a better 4 than what is being presented here. Because the 4 that's being presented here is actually a 5. It's 2025. This all comes from Brazilian journalist Pedro Henrique Lipe. Sorry for the pronunciation if it's incorrect. Who is a pretty reliable Brazilian journalist who's had some correct predictions and correct leaks in the past. This is not Necro Philippe, not associated with Universal Nintendo. They instead talked about in their OX-DO Control video podcast that 5 separate sources across 3 continents gave them this list of information. Basically, Nintendo Switch 2 has been delayed. Everything will be clarified in March because Nintendo is still planning to do some sort of reveal in March 2024 next month. Switch 2 will release during Q1 2025. Now pause, because there was a lot of initial confusion that maybe they were talking about fiscal year 2025. Because fiscal year 2025 begins at the end of March 2024. Therefore, a fiscal year 2025 Q1 release would be like imminent this summer. But the source has clarified multiple times, no, they are not confused about fiscal year versus calendar year. They're talking calendar year 2025. More than 3 people are working with this date in mind, Q1 2025. Another said that originally it was supposed to be released in 2024, but was delayed to 2025. They do not know why it was supposed to be released in 2024 and why it was delayed, why it was decided to push, but they know it's been pushed. The podcast also knows that Nintendo won't stop releasing games for Switch 1 and has more stuff set to be released this year, but only smaller titles. The big titles in development are only for Switch 2 at this point. He says that even though he's not 100%, and you can never be 100% until Nintendo states something officially, he has a lot of sources, a lot of trusted sources, and they're all saying the same thing. Q1 2025. And he predicts a light reveal in March, followed by a blowout in June, and a launch early next year. Now, this was very scary, but a lot of people dismissed it, thinking that, oh, maybe they were wrong about fiscal year. No, that was disproven. Oh, maybe this source is just bad or trying to gain attention or recognizing patterns. No, because it got worse. When VGC and Andy Robinson, a very respected video games journalist, corroborated the report. VGC then posted, Nintendo Switch 2 could now launch in 2025, it's claimed. New reports suggest Nintendo's next console could arrive later than expected, and they state that 2 sources of their own said that it could release early next year. But here is where the sauce gets so darn infected. This is why everything is so detail oriented. This is why everything is so cautious and why you have to really research this stuff. Because I know we're in a period where insiders and leakers are really they're testing our patience, or rather their credibility is being tested. There was no direct yesterday, although I think that situation is also looking mighty good. It's easy to just dismiss things. Oh, the leaker said 2024. Nintendo's going to just wait. The Switch is still selling. There's no Nintendo Switch 2. It's not coming this year. It was never coming this year. This is all a bunch of hogwash. This is all nonsense. They got 5 sources across 3 continents, and now VGC has 2 more sources. Oh my God. Let's read exactly what VGC is saying here, okay? Because it truly changes everything. 2 development sources VGC spoke to on Friday indicated that they were working on Switch 2 games planned for release early next year, but could not confirm if that meant a later than expected launch for the console itself. 2 development sources are working on Switch 2 games launching in early 2025. And here's where it gets crazier. According to the Brazilian journalist Pedro Henrique Lutelipe in his podcast, 5 separate development sources are working on games targeting Q1 2025 to launch alongside the console itself. So all 7 sources are development sources working on Switch 2 games targeting launch in Q1 2025. That to me changes the whole ball game. We're not talking about shipping partners, we're not talking about factories, we're not talking about retail, we're talking about third-party developers who are working on Switch 2 games that are scheduled to launch in Q1 2025. They are making games that are coming out in the launch window, but that doesn't mean that the launch is absolutely when their game comes out. This absolutely eased my fears because I do think this is either a misunderstanding or the sources that they have are just talking about their games. Nintendo obviously wants to have an elongated launch window to make sure that they continue the success of the system beyond its release date releases. And the fact that all these sources are development sources working on Switch 2 games planned for early next year, maybe they were told, hey, let's bump your games. Maybe initially they were targeting the holiday launch and then they were told bump your games, but it's not because the system is being delayed, it's just because their games maybe aren't the biggest games. Maybe their games need more space and time. Maybe Nintendo wants to pace things out as opposed to rushing everything right at the start. If you remember the early years of Nintendo Switch 1, it was absolutely critical that Nintendo had a major title every month. That was the recipe for their success because early on they did not have a ton of third-party support and indies were just starting to come around to putting their games on Switch. They needed a very consistent release schedule, and that is what helped cement Switch as, okay, there is something reliably great coming out all the time, and in contrast to other consoles that often only get 2 or 3 big exclusives a year, this was an awesome new plan. Nintendo could be doing a very similar thing. They easily could be saying, hey, we know we've got a lot of first-party games launching with the system. We know we've got a lot of big multi-platform third-party games coming out with the system. You got Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, this fall is loaded. Let's move your games to Q1 2025, and let's ensure that everybody can have a chance at some sales. One thing you have to remember Nintendo has been heavily criticized for before, and that their system has been really bad at, is ensuring success for third parties. The constant for Nintendo over most of their generations has been first-party sales, and Nintendo exclusive games really push the third parties to the periphery. Everyone buys the Marios, the Zeldas, the Smash Bros, and the Pokemons, and they don't buy the third parties. And then the Switch happened, and as the generation progressed, we saw games like Monster Hunter Rise achieve extreme success, and the recent Hogwarts Legacy sell insanely well on the platform. Third parties have become quite successful on a Nintendo console, still dominated by epic first-party titles. This could be part of Nintendo's strategy to help third parties succeed on their system early, so they want to continue support throughout the life cycle of the next console. Let's also bring in another piece of the information that the podcast is stating. There will be a reveal in March and then a release in Q1. Do you really think that Nintendo is going to announce the system a year in advance and then release it a year later and just let the Switch dry up? They're stating that Nintendo has no more big games, only small titles for the rest of the year, yet they're going to announce it a year in advance and make some people want to just wait for the new system. And it's not like they have big games to hold things over because they're saying all big games have been saved for Switch 2. That makes terrible business sense to me. Why announce a console a year in advance when you don't really have big games to hold the current audience over? And you're basically saying, don't buy our console anymore. We have a new one coming, but it's a year away, so we're not going to tell you about it. But we don't have any exciting games to make you want to buy the console that's currently available now. That seems like an absolute goof. And if you add that information alongside the fact that Nintendo is in a totally different place than they were last generation, I don't think the pattern is going to hold. If you recall, Nintendo said they were working on the next generation of Nintendo hardware, the NX, in early 2016, and then it launched in early 2017. This is separate from the big Switch reveal in October, where they showed the cool trailer on the rooftops and with everybody playing together. Some people are saying, and this podcast is insinuating, Nintendo will follow a similar pattern. A light reveal in March, ta-da, we're making Switch 2, and then detail things later in June, and then release in January, February, or March. But Nintendo was at an extreme position of weakness. The Wii U wasn't selling no matter what. They didn't have big games left to go. They didn't even really have many small games. And so they wanted to let people know, like, Nintendo ain't dying. There's a console coming. We're not on our last little breath. Now the Switch is successful. And if you want the Switch to exist till 2025, you do not cannibalize the sales by announcing the new system. If your goal is to stretch out the Switch development, the Switch lifecycle for any reason, software is being delayed, third parties are having a tough time, you just feel like the Switch can carry you another holiday season, you absolutely do not announce a console in March a full year before. You adjust your plan and make sure that the Switch is the focus. And we have Furukawa himself talking about how important transitions are for this generation. It's going to be different than the past generation, and Nintendo has previously failed at transitioning. That tells me that their previous patterns have not worked to the liking of the executive team currently in charge of Nintendo, and they want to do things differently. You also have Furukawa saying that entering 2025's fiscal year, in the beginning of April, end of March of this year, the main focus is the Switch 1. He would not say that if there was not a Switch 2 on the horizon. And I understand this podcast is saying, well, it still could come out in fiscal 2025 because that ends in March of 2025, and that's what we're predicting. But all of their information taken as a whole really, to me, doesn't add up. I feel like it is poor sources that have some information, but not the full piece of the puzzle. And then once I read the details from VGC, that these sources are third-party development partners who have games coming out in Q1 2025, that completely eradicates the rumor. I really feel like this now becomes a very, very, very nothing burger rumor because we're talking about companies releasing games in the first quarter, not about the system. So the system will definitely be out by the time they release their games, and maybe their games were delayed, or maybe even their games were asked to be pushed, but this is not an indicator that the Switch 2 itself has been delayed, nor that Nintendo is actually targeting a Q1 2025 launch. January, February, and March would still be considered within the launch window of a system that launches in October or the holiday season for 2024. And I guess we'll find out for ourselves when Nintendo says whatever they're going to say in March. Everybody still seems to believe there will be something in March, so you know what? Let's see what Nintendo says. But I'm telling you, based on my knowledge, based on my Nintendo history, and based on the absolute facts that VGC dropped, the clarity that we needed, the clarification that wasn't really focused on in the initial bullet points of what the podcast and Pedro Enrique Lutelipe said, it's development sources with games coming out Q1. That changes everything. That makes me way less afraid, and I think that makes this rumor fly way down the ladder in terms of, hey, it could be true, but you're basing it on a lot of jumping to conclusions. Our conclusion that we're taking here is that because some developers are moving their Switch games to Q1, their Switch 2 games to Q1 2025, that means that the Switch 2 itself has moved to 2025. And I think that is a larger leap in logic than I'm willing to take, and especially at this exact moment, when leakers and insiders have been a little shaky, I do not think you should take this at face value. I do not think you should take this with heart. I do not think you should take this as likely. I think you should take this with a grain of salt, and I think you should take this as a potential possibility out of a bunch of different potentials and possibilities. Yeah, Nintendo could delay the Switch 2 to 2025, but I still much more strongly believe in all the analysts, all the insiders, and all the big reports that state this thing is scheduled to release in 2024. not 7 development partners. Even though it's impressive that they're across many continents, we know there are going to be a hell of a lot of Switch 2 games released when this thing comes out across the entirety of the first year. And that launch window is going to be packed, especially if it is a holiday launch, and those games are going to need space, otherwise it'll cannibalize itself and third parties will feel gypped. Nintendo owes it to them and owes it to the gaming populace to make sure that things are adequately spaced so that they have constant releases, that third parties can sell successfully, and that Nintendo does not have a gap or have any problems making sure that this system sells very well to ensure, as Furukawa always says, that this transition is successful. I rest my case. 7 development sources, not internal sources, not hardware sources, not shipping sources, not manufacturing sources. Read it how you will. Give me your take in the comments down below. Let me know how you feel about this, but I feel like this went from code red scary. I'm going to turn the lights changed, okay? We're going blue. 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 Blue for Switch 2. March will tell us more, but I still think it's on track for 2024. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Love you lots. SwitchForce out.